It's not started yet. It's about to start now. It's about to start now.
It will have already started, that's the thing. Well, that's the way it works. It just blobbles and blobbles and blobbles around. So this is Speaker's Corner. Heiko is going to be speaking in a few minutes. Myself going to be speaking in a few minutes. And there's quite a busy crowd today, and there's no pop concert going on, unlike last week. But it takes a little while to buffer like that, you see. And once it's buffered, it should be away. Strange, it's got... Yeah, it's on there. Right, it must be on, because otherwise it couldn't be... Yeah, it's on there. And we're recording as well now. So here we are, live at Speaker's Corner. All the madness, all the fun of the fair. And I'll be speaking about various things, one of which might be the election if people push me on it. And hand over to Addy then. How are you, right? What's with the coat? Might rain, he says. Might rain. Where? In Moscow. He studied in Moscow, that's right. Well, here we are again. What pearls of wisdom do we have to deal with today?
What are your views on the Trump assassination attempt? Trump.
I think it was a genuine assassination attempt. It's illustrative of the way in which politics is polarised, that such an attempt would be made. I think the Secret Services were incompetent. Who's behind the assassination attempt? Well, it could just be a lone kid. It could also be some factions of the state in the United States who don't like the idea of Donald Trump coming to power. And it's pretty obvious he will come to power, bar him dying, basically. And as for Joe Biden, well, it's just farcical, absolutely farcical. The guy is clearly senile and is clearly incapable of participating in any political process. The question then becomes, which of course underlies my own way of thinking about the world, is given the fact that this man is clearly incapable of making any, even constructing a sentence that coherently flows for more than a few minutes, who's in power? You know, he's clearly not deciding things himself, so who's deciding? So, of course, that's a generic problem under capitalism. Even with the greatest speaker, like someone like Barack Obama, who was quite a good speaker, obviously he's making decisions. But the number of decisions he has to make, and the power behind those decisions, and the weight of the apparatus pushing in different directions, of course, shapes what happens rather than the individual politician. But in circumstances where the politician is incapable of making any decisions, clearly we have a secret state operating to decide what happens. And that is true under capitalism, but it's particularly true in the United States at the moment. You know, it's clearly not Biden deciding, so who is? Apparently Barack Obama plays a role in this. He's got a network of people that he established, because the president basically gets to appoint about 2,000 officials. So that's his power base. And in the United States, the Constitution was designed so that the president wouldn't actually have too much power. They have power, but not too much power, and most of the power is in the individual states. And it's supposedly designed to protect the people against the overreach of the state. But nevertheless, they have 2,000 appointees. And of course, a former president with a machinery backing what he's doing, like Barack Obama, gets to maintain connections through these 2,000 employees and the influence they exercise over political life. And it's believed that Barack Obama plays an important role in the politics of America, regardless of the fact that he's not got any formal position in relation to that. And so, you know, his decision to move against Biden is pretty much indicative that Biden's going to go, because he has, as I said, this ongoing influence through the network of patronage which he established when he was in power.
Well, the donors have took the money anyway, so you have to.
Well, he has to go, yes.
No money. The donors frozen.
And of course, if he refuses, if he was individually stubborn enough to continue refusing, then I'm sure some pills could be administered to him to make him die before the election happens. So I think that's a distinct possibility if he really was to continue to refuse. But now he's got COVID. He probably got long COVID.
Yeah.
And long COVID will certainly knock him out, long COVID. It's a terrible thing, long COVID. Millions of people suffering from it. And poor old Joe Biden suffering from the worst long COVID in the world. And I mean, it's a terrible thing because he's had injections. He's had booster after booster after booster. And here he is down with flirt.
He said that people who get vaccinated won't get COVID.
Of course, you won't get it. But I mean, don't forget, we don't know when the senility set in, and we don't know whether his senility might have been accelerated by the number of vaccinations he received. I'm not saying vaccinations cause senility, YouTube algorithm, but you never know. Such things might not be beyond the realm of possibility. Now, I did read. In fact, I've got it in my bag here today. I haven't finished it, but I started looking at it. This
Joe Biden did not commit suicide.
This one. I started reading this week. I didn't finish it yet, so I'm not going to make my definitive comments. But, they call it an inquiry into COVID. Right? And what they did was they called on all the morons who they had as officials and experts during the 2 years of madness and of tyranny. They called on all those experts and got them to attend a meeting in Paddington, and they wrote down what they said. And then this Baroness Hallett, DBE, whatever that means. What does it mean? Dame of the British Empire?
Yeah.
Something like that. She wrote this inquiry, and I've seen some people say, "Oh, it's a good report. People didn't expect that." So I opened the report up, and I started going through the evidential material that she presents. And I found here, for example, in the first couple of pages, riddled with nonsense. So, for example, here, they start out with this is the introduction. They start out with the assessing of the nation's preparedness. Then they go on to talk about pandemics in the past and how they've affected people. And they've affected a large number of people in the world. And the amount of people is largely, are far from unknown, they claim. Then they go on to have a chart of all the supposed pandemics that have affected humanity in the last century or so, or century and a bit. And they start out with Russian flu. Now, Russian flu was apparently, now they say here, the uncertainty here, pathogen, uncertainty, they say influenza or HCOV-43. Now, HCOV-43, not many of you have heard of it. HCOV-43 is a coronavirus. Supposedly, we knew nothing about coronavirus. HCOV-43 is a coronavirus which produces almost exactly the same symptoms that are claimed to be causing COVID-19 or have caused COVID-19. Almost exactly the same symptoms. The year of Russian flu, because of course we never knew about these illnesses before. The year of HCOV-43, 1889 to 1894. 5 years of so-called HCOV-43. I see my friend here, just a citation from that. I believe it was Frederick Engels, he writes at the time, he says, I lost my sense of smell. I lost my sense of smell.
When was it viruses were discovered?
Well, I don't know, but in any case, I don't know when they're supposed to be discovered. Someone else tell me. Or look on the internet. What I'm saying is here, this is the COVID inquiry the official report, and they're claiming that they can't tell whether Russian flu in 89 to 94 was influenza or coronavirus. And yet, the whole of this report then continues to say the big mistake of the British government was to prepare for a flu pandemic and not a coronavirus pandemic. How exactly would you differentiate? If it's supposedly an airborne or droplet transmitted illness, how are you supposed to differentiate? Apart from by symptoms, there's no other measures you could take to prevent someone getting flu than any measure you could take to prevent someone getting HCOV-43 or NL63 or SARS-CoV-1 or SARS-CoV-2. None of those things could be prevented by any measures that are any different for flu or the cold or a coronavirus. In fact, coronaviruses were normally known as the common cold. Until 2019, we called infections with coronaviruses the common cold. And every child in Britain had got 4 coronavirus infections with types of common cold before they're 15 years of age. And therefore they developed immunity to coronaviruses or to variants of coronaviruses, 4 different strands before they are 15 years of age. And yet we are told in this report, again, they say a brand new pathogen. Well, it's an HCOV. An HCOV, a COV, coronavirus means a virus with a crown on it. In other words, your body recognizes the crown. It recognizes it, the spike protein, and it captures the spike protein with antibodies, or it kills infected cells with T cells. That's the theory. Now, there are other theories, but that's the dominant theory medically about the processes involved. Now, if HCOV-43 was around in 1889, all the generations since that time will have had those infections and will have had immunity, a rough immunity, created by those infections from 1889. Of course, the problem with this, of course, is there's nothing to indicate that this HCOV-43 wasn't around in, say, 1520, or around in 1320, or around 100 years BC, or around 1,000 years BC. In fact, I think the calculation for HCOV-43 is something like 1,000 years old. 1,000 years old. So they say. But I think probably it's a lot longer than that. Then they turn around and say, oh, then there was the deadly Spanish flu. Spanish flu came. Wait for it. What year? 1918 to 1920. Immediately after the First World War. And in the First World War, troops from the United States, troops from Europe were injected with multiple vaccinations, supposedly to protect them against chemical warfare. Second thing is, after the First World War, even in Switzerland, there was mass starvation. Even in Switzerland, in Holland, in Belgium, in Germany, in Russia, people were starving to death. So combine those things together and you wonder why people came down ill with any pathogen that came along. It didn't have to be Spanish flu, it could have been anything. And then they say here, an incredible thing they put in this report. This is on page, what's it? The first 3 pages. Page 6 this is. Page 6 of the report. This table here, for all these different influenzas, coronaviruses, etc. This table here is asymptomatic infection, widespread, question mark. Starting one, HCOV-43, unknown but probable. On what evidence is that based? Zero evidence. Spanish flu, infection asymptomatic, they say yes. Evidence, zero. Influenza H2N2. Yes, asymptomatic. Evidence, zero. They don't even cite any evidence. They don't even cite it. The only one they claim is Ebola. Ebola. They're saying Ebola, you have to have contact and there's no asymptomatic transmission. There is no evidence from anywhere in the world that coronavirus called SARS-CoV-2, at least in the first 2 years, no evidence whatsoever that anybody caught this from someone who was asymptomatic. There is no evidence for that. And yet, this is the official report by the numbskulls. They spent 2 years preparing this report, and then they put this out to the public. The mass media gulp it up, and then they spread the lies to the population. And then they say at the back of this report, and this is the core, at the very end of the report, this is the last page, and it says, recommendations. This is the crux of it. It says the UK government should consult to create an independent body for whole system civil emergency preparation and resilience. A new body should be given responsibility for independent strategic advice to the UK government and devolved administration for planning, preparedness and building resilience to whole system civil emergencies. In other words, to prepare lockdowns, mass vaccinations, track and trace, monitoring, universal surveillance, universal control, stay-at-home orders, all these things. They want to have an independent body advising the government. But more importantly, the very last phrase says, as an interim measure, based on her report alone, the new body should be established on a non-statutory basis, so no legal framework for it, within 12 months of this report. Within 12 months, they want to have a system in place to impose lockdowns, impose a dictatorship, impose vaccine mandates, impose restrictions on your movement and on your freedom, impose drug administration, impose a monitoring and surveillance without any statutory foundation whatsoever. No law, no parliamentary act, no regulation, just because she wrote a report. That's the argument they make. And some numbskulls have been telling me this week that, oh my God, what an interesting report. They're saying the evidence wasn't properly listened to from all sides of the debate. But if you listen to what sides of the debate they listen to, you can tell what's going on here. Because Keir Starmer, the newspaper says today, Keir Farmer, sorry, very good one. I'll adopt that, thank you very much. And I won't give you credit.
I don't want the credit.
Keir Farmer has just appointed Sir Patrick Vallance as a minister. As a minister. This man was the man promoting the idea of rolling out the mRNA vaccines to the whole population, including children under 12 years of age. And dozens of children have had heart attacks, myocardial, pericarditis as a consequence of the vaccines that were administered under instruction or recommendation from Patrick Vallance and his entourage. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that creature from the dark, that man of Big Pharma, is the man appointed as a minister now. I believe it's health and science they're talking about. He's a minister for. Now, I could continue here. I won't continue too much, but I looked at a few. Asymptomatic, no evidence. Case fatality rate. Here we've got the great thing. The numbers who died. So now they claim in here, the numbers who died, COVID had a case fatality rate, she says here, between 0.5 and 1%. But the evidence for that is contradicted by the World Health Organization in its bulletin of January 2021, where John Ioannidis, the leading epidemiologist in the world, showed that the case fatality rate
for COVID-19 after 1 year of circulation was less than 0.23%. In other words, no different to a seasonal flu, no different to a mild or medium impact seasonal flu. And of course, up until now, because the rate has gone down, if you actually look over a 4-year period from 2019 until today, so 4.5-year period, the case fatality rate will be no higher than 0.1 or 0.01 or 0.015. In other words, no higher than a normal cold season. And that ignores the fact that millions were affected in their health by the closure of hospitals, the closure of schools, the closure of normal life, the loss of their jobs, and in some places, like India for example, hundreds of millions of people lost their jobs and were driven out of the cities, driven to the countryside. Many walked for hundreds and hundreds of miles. The economies of Africa, Southeast Asia, and India totally collapsed. South America totally collapsed while we were being paid to sit on Zoom and watch each other on Zoom for 2 years and talk about how the new modern economy, guided by AI and artificial intelligence, is leading the way to a new future where everything can be developed scientifically, technologically, economically, efficiently. And now what do we get? The entire world economy downed in 1 day as a consequence of an update to a Microsoft virus program. That's what happened in the last week. I went to my walking tour this morning. Someone came up to me, she's from Colombia. I couldn't pay you online and I couldn't get money out of the bank because the whole banking system was unable to process because Microsoft updates didn't allow you. Sorry? Well, it is a CrowdStrike, but it's a Microsoft. It's to do with Microsoft computers when they need updates to their security, which of course are always going on because the whole thing's designed. The reason why Microsoft moved on to supposed pandemic preparation was because they knew this was a lucrative field, and the rubbish software produced by Microsoft, riddled with viruses, computer viruses, meaning the computers were constantly shutting down. And I worked on Microsoft software from 1995 until 2004 when they were rolling out their dominant position over the marketplace. And we used to be infested with viruses, one day after another. You'd spend half your time knocking the viruses out, and then another one come along. But now they don't even have people trained to deal with these problems. You used to be able to close down a computer, and people would know when you go into safe mode, then you delete those files, and then you can start again. That's what they need to do with this present crisis they've happened. But most people don't know how to do that now. They don't know how the computer operates, how the AI operates, how the internet infrastructure operates. And by the way, there was a piece by the inventor of the modern internet, of the World Wide Web. Some of you might have seen it this week. Tim Berners-Lee. He said, well, the crisis is this. We have records from, for example, papyrus records from ancient Egypt about what they were doing in ancient Egypt with taxes or with food collection and so on. But now if you get yourself a floppy disk from 1995 with data on it, you can't find a machine that will open it. You could go all around the whole of London looking for someone who can open that floppy disk. Gone. For example, I used to run a YouTube channel. Now all my videos are recorded on someone else's YouTube channel. When YouTube took the brilliant decision to delete the channel that I used to run because it was spreading medical misinformation, unlike this piece of bullshit, I was spreading medical misinformation, apparently. And then that's been deleted. And so the deletion of that means never again accessible. If you've got a library, I just went to the British Library round reading room in the British Museum. There they store the knowledge of humanity on pieces of paper. When we want to buy something, we used to pull out, and today I luckily have been able to pull out pieces of paper. We use cash as the mechanism. In the line, you go to the shop, they got no cash, no machine. You've talked about this, Piers has talked about, others have talked about this. You go to the shops and they don't want cash anymore. And yet once the computer systems collapse, as they did in the last week, suddenly they're all scrambling around for cash. You need to have human related records and physical records in order to have an accurate capacity to deal with the crisis that emerged as a consequence of this madness which they've created, whereby technology rules man rather than man ruling technology.
They're getting rid of these, isn't it? That's why I heard it's going to be on your phone.
On your phone is going to be a chip in your head, my friend.
Yeah.
A chip on your fingernail. That's what they want. So you bleep here. Oh, it's ever so convenient. You bleep here, you bleep there, you bleep there. And if they decide that you are no longer creditworthy, then you're not allowed to use the underground system. You're not allowed to get on a bus. You're not allowed to draw any money out the bank. That's basically, or get a coffee. That's basically the structure that they want. And in that way, they will be able to nudge you to behave in a certain way, to make you act the way they want you to act. And they don't even know, when I say they, it's not even them. They don't even know how to act. As I mentioned earlier on, Joe Biden is the president of the wealthiest, most powerful country in the history of the world. Yet he is senile and doesn't know what day it is, right? So therefore it's not Joe Biden controlling what happens with these resources. It's algorithms controlled by giant corporations driving and pushing humanity towards its own destruction.
They're changing him, my friend.
Sorry?
They're changing Biden.
Who's changing Biden?
It's going to be changed this weekend. This weekend.
Well, maybe. Not disputing
No, what do you
that.
mean, baby? Definite.
He
can't run the
You've
country
been
anymore.
reading Twitter too much.
Yes,
He's been reading Twitter yesterday
my friend.
and this morning,
If the country
even though I haven't. Therefore, how can I be in the know if I haven't looked at the latest Twitter feed? How can I know anything?
Yeah.
You haven't seen the
Why
latest
they're
Twitter
changing
feed. You don't know anything.
Why they're changing him?
Why they are changing him?
Yeah,
Because
if you say
because it
the
doesn't
country
look
is
good.
nothing to do with Joe Biden, why they're changing him?
I didn't say nothing to do with Joe Biden.
Oh, you said
I
it.
said,
You just said it.
I said, they is not really Joe Biden. I said they is actually the capitalist corporations controlling artificial algorithms,
Nonsense.
a trajectory of human. Now you're saying some extent. I've nudged you in my direction with my Twitter feed, which automatically updated and implanted the information via Neuralink directly into your brain. How do I know you are not like the ABBA voyage in Wembley? How do I know you are not a hologram? My meeting, disrupting me on behalf of Elon Musk. How do we know this? In future you will not know. How will you know in future if you're talking to a hologram or a human? A deep fake of you. Dressed as Harry Potter. And having sex with Madonna. Distracts us from what we should be thinking about.
That is the consequence.
See the watch?
Computer breakdown.
You see the state of our recent.
It depends what AI image you have seen of her.
Go back to the 80s.
Look, exactly. Go back to ABBA. ABBA is showing us the future. The ABBA concert. Thousands go to the ABBA concert for the ABBA experience every single night. Right? So what use is them? A meeting on an election or a discussion about politics. What use is that? When television has already anointed Keir Starmer several years before. What's the point in an election? Why don't you just have the artificial algorithm decide the election? And this man disrupt the meeting that discusses the election, and in that way, there's no need. I'm only messing with you. I'm only messing with you, my friend. I'm only messing. I know you have. Huh?
A bit of a flavour to
Look
discussion.
at this, look at this. It's a bit of. How long have you been coming to Speaker's Corner, my friend? I suspect you've been in for quite a few years. I recognise the style of debate. There you go, you see. I knew it. A troublemaker. Do not trust a regular at Speaker's Corner. They only want to cause trouble.
Of course.
Very true.
Of course. Why not?
Try and disrupt the logic of the speaker. You're like a virus on a computer. You're the human equivalent. You're the human equivalent of a computer worm.
Can we continue?
No, we cannot. Are there any questions from the audience? I see the Palestinians have arrived.
Do you believe in deep state? You believe in deep state?
Good question.
Don't you?
I do, but I still think. You see,
who's that?
at the time of the Soviet Union,
You believe in deep state?
at the time of the Soviet Union,
Like Boris Johnson.
the world was sharply divided, and everybody, the CIA knew what they were fighting against. They trained them in studying anti-Marxism, and they prepared them for war with the Soviets. That never came. But at least they knew what they were trying to do. The spies, the Dr. No's, the Cold War warriors. They knew what they were supposed to be fighting against. Now I don't think they have a clue what they're fighting against. We are supposedly in favour, a little word for the gentleman here, we are supposedly in favour of democracy. And yet here we are, Britain, France, Germany, America, 100% behind Netanyahu and the goons bombing the people in Palestine and saying that's civilization. And when you ask them, why are you killing all the children in Palestine? Why have you blown up Gaza? They turn around and say, what about October the 7th? Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? That's the moronic argument of the intellectual classes governing politics in the Western world today. That's it. That shows their argument. That's what it boils down to. From nothing, as Heiko said, the great German philosopher. From nothing, with nothing, to nothing. That's what they're composed. Their arguments have no substance whatsoever. And when you challenge them, you're a hate marcher, and you're a criminal, and you're a terrorist. Rebellion against oppression, rebellion against occupation is not a crime. It's a legitimate struggle of the people for their liberation. And by the way, even in Ireland, they began to, even under Margaret Thatcher, when they said they were so horrified by what was happening, they were negotiating with the IRA. And Israel is negotiating with Hamas today. They pretend they're not, they are. And the Netanyahu government in the past was financing and supporting Hamas because they thought a two-state solution has to be opposed. Therefore, Hamas is opposed to this, and therefore we can finance and support Hamas. By the way, Hamas is right on that. There is no two-state solution. There is only one-state solution, the unity of the people, Jewish, Palestinian, Arabic, united together with equal rights. That's all there is. That's the only solution. And if that means an armed uprising against Israel, so be it. The Indians had the right to rebellion. The Irish had the right to rebellion. The British always claim they've the right to rebellion. Fight them on the beaches, fight them on the sea, fight them on the land. Why do the Palestinians not have the same right? Of course they do. Therefore, this hypocrisy and nonsense they talk about is only about imperial power. And now the British government, Keir Farmer as they call him, the first thing he does to show his new image is hold a meeting with Vladimir Zelensky and say, we are prepared to send weapons to shoot against Russia. and then we are prepared to send weapons, ultimately they're saying, to shoot against China. That's what they're saying. They're preparing you psychologically for war with Russia, war with China. None of us have an interest in war with Russia. None of us have an interest in war with China. We should be making alliances with Russia, alliances with China, with the people in China. City to city, town to town, village to village, connect the people together. That's what we should be doing in the 21st century. Not preparing to destroy each other and eradicate each other, spending vast quantities of weapons to eradicate the people. The people, from Marx argued this 150 years ago, unite the working classes of the world from below in struggle. That's how you create a unified world. You won't create a unified world by bombing people and slaughtering people and plundering people, which is how the world is organised today. I've been speaking for a while. I think I've said enough. Thanks very much. I will be away for 2 weeks. I will be away for 2 weeks, and thereafter on the election. I'm having another 2 weeks off. Come on. I'm having another 2 weeks off. My father is visiting Europe, and I will go and see him. He's 89 years of age. I have to spend some time with my dad. So that's why I'm going for a couple of weeks. Thanks very much for listening, and those of you who made the effort during the election campaign to give some support, to attend the meetings, to attend the debates. One thing we did, I didn't get many votes. 491 it turned out, after 6,500 votes were discovered that were missing. But nevertheless, what we did do in Putney is we organised the most extensive debates in the whole of the country, in any constituency. We had 10 different debates with different people from different political parties, and organised discussions and debates far more sophisticated than took place on television or than took place anywhere else in the country. Of that, I think we have a proud record of having stood up for what democracy really means, rather than what crossing a piece of paper and anointing a care farmer actually represents. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, citizen, well done as always. Heiko, Khoo. Fantastic. So, shall I just begin? Yeah. I know we're carrying on from what
break the rules or not break the rules.
Heiko said about public. That was tremendous what he did there. In Bermondsey,